Hey everyone, welcome back to the 776 Gods. I'm Makse of the 776 Gods, and today we're going to be discussing the locations on Zutera. So on Zutera, there are four main regions, which are typically referred to as lands, that we're going to be talking about. This is where most of the important things happen on Zutera. Now these lands are pretty large. We're talking continent-sized or even a little bit bigger. It's also important to note that Zutera is about 3 times the size of Earth. So the first land, the most important, and where a lot of the stories have taken place, is known as the Lands of the Founder. In this video, we're basically going to be focusing on the Lands of the Founder. The other regions are huge, just like this one, and they all deserve their own video. The Lands of the Founder is further broken up down into 11-ish different places. To a lot of commoners, they're typically referred to as continents, but a lot of them don't really classify as continents. A lot of them are just big islands. The first and most well-known is the mainland. It's where a vast majority of stories have taken place. There are multiple countries, or provinces, depending on who you ask, that exist on the mainland. Those being Zarya, the Westerlands, the Deepwoods, Witherwood, the Sandscar Desert, the Rift, and the Catanian Jungle. Zarya is the home of the Twin Kings. It exists on the northern part of the mainland, and its neighbor, Witherwood, is also located up north. In the current-day mainland, the Witherwood is actually part of Zarya, and its official name is the Protectorate of Witherwood. The capital of Witherwood is known as Pilfenborough, and it's under the governance of a local god known as Ojokade. Zarya's capital is, well, the city of Zarya, and it's under the governance of the Twin Kings, whose names are Brizal Maximus and King Ryan. Just south of Zarya and its Protectorate of Witherwood, we've got the Deepwoods and the Westerlands. The Westerlands, and specifically its capital city of, well, the Royal City. Which royal city, you may ask? Well, the royal city of the humans, of course, is one of the most important cities in the region. It has one of the largest ports and one of the largest airship ports in the realm. The royal city is governed by King Echorius IV, who more or less proclaimed himself the king of the humans. In its prime, under the rule of King Echorius and his predecessors, the Westerlands spanned almost a fourth of the continent, but due to 2 catastrophic battles and 1 natural disaster, he lost most of the historic range of his nation. The other region, in the sort of middle of the continent, would be the Deepwoods. The Deepwoods is a neutral zone. It was declared neutral by Dromé back in the First Age on Zutera. King Echorius of the Royal City learned how neutral it was when he tried to station troops there. The capital of the Deepwoods, if you can call it that, is a place known as the Janny Camp. Janny roughly translates to outsider, and that's mostly what it is, a camp of outsiders. Well, it was a camp of outsiders until it got turned into a town of outsiders, and at that point, can you really call it a town of outsiders? It and the Royal City have 2 of the most prestigious magic academies in the realm, but due to being so far out in the boonies, a lot of people don't go to the one in the Janny Camp. Last for the mainland, we've got the southern regions, which is composed of the Rift, the Sandscar Desert, and the Catanian Jungle. The Rift is mostly inhabited by elves and dwarves. The elves live in the city of Wiccanscree, which is on the surface, and the dwarves live in the city of Vilskeig, which is underneath the city of Wiccanscree. Both of them consider both cities to be the capital, even though they're entirely different cities. Next you've got the Sandscar Desert, whose capital is the town of Sandscar. It's literally a town built into a scar in the desert, thus the name Sandscar. The Scar part of Sandscar was born from battle between Haral and Dromé. Lastly, we've got the Catanian Jungle, easily one of the least populated regions on the mainland, although that's beginning to change mainly because of the leader of a different nation across the sea. This leader is who we're going to be discussing next, along with his country. The region of Kokura's Rift is, well, also the nation of Kokura's Rift. Kokura's Rift is mostly inhabited by demons, versus the mainland, which was pretty mixed. Similar to Sandscar, Kokura's Rift is called Kokura's Rift because, well, it's related to Kokura, and it's cut in half, thus the Rift part. A lot of people thought that Kokura was resting in the Rift after she had been defeated by Astroloth, which turned out to be true. Kokura's Rift is ruled over jointly by Kokura, now that she's been awakened, and also by a demon named Agdrazal. Yggdrasil is the reason why the Catanian jungle is becoming more populated. It's also the reason why Kokura's Rift is becoming much more civilized. Previous demon rulers were known to, well, slaughter massive sections of their population, and Yggdrasil decided, hey, let's not kill huge swaths of our population just for fun. And yeah, it seems like it's working out for them. But it's time to move on to the next demon-infested wasteland. This one's known as the Deadlands. Fun! The Deadlands is mainly known as the Deadlands because, well, it looks pretty dead. And the reason it looks pretty dead is because Astroloth at one point decided to throw a temper tantrum right before he got banished. The Deadlands has 3 major cities, one of them being sort of wishy-washy. The first city is New Moon's Rise. It's built on a giant rock spire, and it's not well known for its hospitality. However, New Moon's Rise is a useful location because of its, well, fairly central location, and also the fact that it's not one of the other cities. That city is the Citadel of the Black Dragon Kings, which is the one that's sort of wishy-washy. It's mostly inhabited by the demon soldiers. The demon soldiers who serve the Black Dragon Kings. But the Black Dragon Kings are so weird, we're going to put them in a different video. Anyways, moving on. Lastly, we've got the Head. It's the northernmost city on the Deadlands, and it's also probably the most civilized, even though it's probably one of the more chaotic ones. It's big enough and impoverished enough to have multiple gangs that roam the city, and they all love to fight over the turf, much to the dismay of the citizens. The Head is also one of the last places in the realm that you're able to buy slaves legally. But is it really legal when the laws are coming from the gangs that run the city and not necessarily the government? I'll leave that up for you to decide. Aside from the cities, there's a few different regions that the Deadlands is known for as well. One of these regions being unofficially known as the Bloodless Plains. It's known for its massive groups of vampires, feral vampires. They do occasionally wander into the other regions, but as long as you're fairly far away, you're pretty safe. The Deadlands is also known for one of the most prestigious magic academies in the entire realm. Although it isn't a part of any city, it's just out there. The last place here we're going to talk about is Fier's Chasm. It's a place well known among magic students because a lot of magic students tend to take their final exams here. The reason it's actually called Fier's Chasm is because there are beings called fear elementals here, and they take on the shape of your greatest fear. But come now, I think we're done with the Deadlands for the moment. Don't want to bore you to death after all. And let's move on to the Frozen North. Don't worry, we're getting there. The Frozen North is pretty chill, but not in the literal sense. It's not exactly the safest place in the realm, and you wouldn't want to move there. One of the southern regions, known as the Wastes, was previously purchased by Zarya, and is technically part of Zarya proper. The purchase of the Wastes actually allows Zarya to completely control the region known as the Strait of Zahal, which is the waterway between the mainland and the Frozen North. Then you've got Woganolth. Woganolth is very well known in the region for being a police state. That's about it. Although it might get shaken up a bit with the recent hostilities going on up there between the various nations. Then you've got Cyrillina. It's sort of sandwiched between a bunch of the different nations, and therefore it's mostly known for just either traveling through or over it. Then you've got the Northern Compact. Oh, the Northern Compact. Don't you just love having somebody to hate? The Northern Compact is a bunch of cities that decided to coalesce together into, well, the Northern Compact, making up the entirety of the northern region of the Frozen North. They have complete control over the northern coast into Zero's Ocean. The reason I asked if you love somebody to hate is because they've decided to enact hostilities towards some of these southern nations, and some various organizations from around the world don't take kindly to such large-scale warfare much anymore. Then we've got 2 regions that don't have capitals because they aren't actual nations. Those 2 locations being the Frozen Maw and the Forsaken Plains. Frozen Maw is more of a separator between the Forsaken Plains and the rest of the Frozen North. There's not really much there that's interesting. The Forsaken Plains is called that because those that venture there typically don't come back. Now for a quickie. The Badlands is one of the most southern regions of the realm, and it's also, honestly, one of the most forgettable. It's mainly just inhabited by separate groups of adventurers and explorers that came down from other nations to try to claim land for those nations. But all they really ended up doing was just wasting a ton of resources on an area that isn't really worth it. Next up, the Dragon Wilds. The Dragon Wilds isn't as wild as it sounds. It actually has one of the largest cities on the realm, with very few that come even close. This city is known as Crest, and it's one of the biggest collections of Dracokin and dragons in the realm. Although it's not necessarily a great tourist destination at the moment, mainly because of the Civil War. But that subject deserves a video entirely of its own. Next we arrive at the Sanctum Lands. The Sanctum Lands, well, to put it simply, I've joked about other places being out in the boonies, but this place, there's one city on an island that is inhabited. The rest of the continent is not. And when I say it's not inhabited, I don't include the groups of hunters or researchers that go out into the woods. Many battles between gods have taken place there, and the nature just doesn't seem to care. It always comes back just fine. That little island is known as Luthen, and the city on the island is known as Luthenrog. Luthenrog is mostly inhabited by dwarves, and they have built themselves a metropolis, let me tell you. Before I said that Crest was basically unrivaled, well, the rival to Crest is Luthenrog. It's huge, there's a lot of dwarves and a lot of other people living there, and they are very technologically advanced. Luthen is also home to one of the other great magic academies. Next up is a fairly small region, simply known as the Wintergreen Isles. It's much farther north than the frozen north, and it's also way colder. A sparse few people live up here, and those that do are some of the hardiest people in the realm. Although there's no real cities to speak of up there, it's mostly just small tribes that wander the ice sheets. A region that we're only going to really mention in passing is the Wyvern Highlands. It's mainly just inhabited by dragons, not even really Dracokin. There's no towns to speak of, there's basically no people anyways, so most people don't really include it in their lists of places to travel to. Next up, we've got the Origin Islands. The Origin Islands are an incredibly important set of islands, despite their small size. Some of the more optimistic researchers in the past could really call this place the little nation that could, because after being completely wiped out by an invading military, they still hung on, and to this day, they're still an important region despite their low population density. The islands are home to a group of races known as the part humans, and they're called part humans because, well, they look like they might be part human and part some other creature. But we'll get into the origins of the Origin Islands later. The capital of the Origin Islands is known as Zecora Ven, and it's governed by a group known as the FAD, or the Futier Advancement Directorate. Hey guys, we're basically at the end of this region anyways. The last place we've got left is the Theif Islands. The Theif Islands is known as that because, well, there's a lot of people would consider thieves there. A lot of bandits, a lot of unsavory folk, you know the kind. And shockingly, they've built civilizations around their hobbies. And by hobbies, I mean pillaging other civilizations. The biggest city in the region is known as Aruna. However, due to recent circumstances, Aruna has been rendered mostly empty. That is a subject we will go into in a later video. We've reached the end of the summarization of the Lands of the Founder. If you're still here with me by the end of this video, thank you very much for listening or watching, whatever you did. Hope you guys have a good one. This is Makse of the 776 Gods, signing off.